Welcome to the South Sudan National Participation Institute. Today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, our fellow viewers and listeners, we just want to welcome you and continue with our discussion on diversity, regional intervention, and the quest for a lasting peace in South Sudan. In the past 2 weeks, we had attempted to bring this program live streaming in our live streaming program, but due to technical problems, we were unable to do so. So today we are trying to record this program, and after recording it, we are going to upload it in our Facebook page. So we hope you will continue with us today. But before we do our presentation, we just want to make some few announcements. The first one is that over the last few weeks, we have developed a comprehensive program for our South Sudan National Participation Institute. And the reason is that we just want to put our plans into action in a very comprehensive way. And in this plan, that will be catering for the different needs of our viewers and listeners and our members and our friends. The plan includes the educational programs, of course, the cultural programs, the social programs, the religious programs, the economic programs, and so on. And the main purpose is just to cater for the different needs of our people, our viewers, and our listeners. That is number one. The second plan that we had developed is the South Sudan Peace and National Reconciliation Initiative. Back in May of this year, we have made a presentation about the same topics, about the topic of peace and reconciliation in South Sudan. And in that presentation, we mentioned that without putting our plans into a concrete program that we can see and do, then all that we talk about will not result into anything. That is why we developed this comprehensive initiative here, hoping that we will be able to cater for the plight of our people, and will also work for peace and reconciliation in the South Sudan. And we had also made 2 presentations on racism in North America and Europe, and we had promised that we are going to make a 3rd presentation about racism, colonialism, and tribalism in Africa. But due to the importance of this topic today, we have postponed that presentation on racism to the next segment of our presentation. So today, as we had mentioned earlier, our topic is about diversity, regional and foreign intervention in South Sudan, and the quest for a lasting peace in the South Sudan. So we are going to talk about different subtopics. The first thing we are going to talk is about the South Sudan. Some of our listeners may not be aware of where South Sudan is, and we are going to talk briefly about where South Sudan is. The next thing we will talk about is the people of South Sudan. I will talk about the people of South Sudan because of the diversity of the people of South Sudan. That's why we see the conflict in South Sudan. We will also talk about the different visions that are trying to shape the future of the people of South Sudan, or the country of South Sudan. In particular, we will talk about 3 peace initiatives. And then we will talk about the system of governance in South Sudan. And then we will talk about the foreign interventions before we will conclude about the recommendations for a brighter future in South Sudan in the light of all these things that we had already mentioned. So to start off, we just want to talk about South Sudan. South Sudan is a country that falls in the eastern part of the African continent. Prior to the year 2011, South Sudan had been part of the Sudan. But due to differences in religion, culture, and unequal economic and social development between the North and the South, and the multicultural and the multi-ethnic and multi-religious nature of South Sudan, the people of South Sudan opted for an independence in the year 2011. So, in a nutshell, if you look at this map, this is where South Sudan is. South Sudan is this part of the old Sudan, which actually became an independent country in 2011. South Sudan falls between the latitudes of 4 degrees above the equator line and 10 degrees north above the equator line, except for this part of South Sudan, which is located in Reng. It actually extends northward towards 12 degrees latitude north of the equator line. So the northern part of South Sudan is located in the Reng. The southern part is in Nimule. The eastern part is in Kiala, and the western part is in Iba in western Equatoria. So this is briefly about South Sudan. And South Sudan actually is very rich in terms of its natural resources, in terms of its diversity, in terms of the agricultural lands. Now, when we are talking about the diversity of the people of South Sudan, South Sudan, as we had mentioned, constitutes of more than 64 ethnic groups. They are divided into 4 major groups. The first group is the Nilotics. They live in the northern part of South Sudan and some to the western part of South Sudan. And they are called the Nilotics, as we had mentioned. The major groups here are the Denka, the Nuer, the Chuluk, the Anuak, and so on. And most of them actually are cattle herders, so that's why they live along the Nile. The second group is the Nilohamites, and these are groups that are of Hamitic background, but then they intermarry with the Nilotics, and they form the Nilohamites. The Nilohamites also, some of them live along the River Nile in the Sudan or South Sudan, but some also live far away from the River Nile. Most of them are agriculturalists. Some of them keep cattle. And to the east, or say to the west of the Nilohamites, are the Sudanic tribal groups, which is largely constituted of the Mahdi and the Moro groups, and they live in the southern western part of South Sudan. And the last but not the least group is the Azande, which is the Azande and the Balanda, and they are part of the Bantu speaking groups that are also located in South Sudan. And in between, you find different ethnic groups that constitute the 64 plus ethnic groups in South Sudan. So that is in a nutshell about South Sudan and its people. So now let's move to the different visions that are trying to shape South Sudan. We had already talked about the political history of South Sudan in many presentations. So today we are not going to dwell on that really. But we want to talk about the visions that actually try to shape South Sudan. When South Sudan, it started its struggle for independence, which goes back to more than like 60 years ago, the vision and the demand of the people was simple. It's just to form an independent South Sudan where there is peace, you know, freedom, development, and prosperity. That was the vision of South Sudan. Because they felt like they did not find all of these things when they used to live within the northerns or within the Sudanese country. Now that's why they wanted to opt for an independent country so that they can achieve some of those goals that had been mentioned there. But within the South Sudan, even though there are other simmering difficulties, such as tribalism and the way the people live, because some of them are agriculturalists, some of them are cattle keepers, and some of them do different trades and so on. The people of South Sudan did not pay attention to that, to those minor problems. Their main focus during the struggle was the North, because they felt like those are the people who are actually subjugating them to all of those difficulties in life, to all of those marginalization, discrimination, and so on. So, but after South Sudan became an independent country in 2011, after the referendum in which the people of South Sudan actually overwhelmingly voted for an independent South Sudan, those simmering problems emerged into the surface. And that is why South Sudan today is severely suffering from these problems. The problem of tribalism or ethnic differences, the problem of power and control, the problem of lack of peace, perpetual war, especially the wars that erupted in 2013 and continues up to today. And then there are so many other problems, such as control of the wealth, and the system of governance and so on. So, but over the years, different visions emerge. For example, the vision of what type of governance should be adopted in South Sudan. Should it be the decentralized system of governance? Should it be a federal system of governance, or whatever system of governance that the people of South Sudan will adopt? And this is where the problem is. And there are other visions, such as the Sudan's People Liberation Army or movement vision of a united, democratic, circular Sudan, where there is equal economic development, equal social development, and so on. And then there is the vision of the Sudan People Liberation Movement Army in opposition, where they want a reform South Sudan, reform institutions, reform system of governance, and equitable sharing of resources and development. And there is the vision of the National Salvation Front, where it wants to restore dignity, freedom, unity, and development, and adoption of a federal system of governance in South Sudan. And of course, in between there are different visions. The visions of some of the neighboring countries who wants a weak South Sudan, where they can be able to actually manipulate the leadership in South Sudan and gear them towards their own interests. And there is a vision from other neighboring countries of financial control or economic control of the resources in South Sudan, and the visions of countries such as China, where they just want to focus on their own personal interests and so on. And the visions from other countries in the West, where they want to promote democracy, peace, and freedom in South Sudan. And this vision is actually championed by the Troika countries that include the United States of America, United Kingdom, and Norway, as well as Canada. And of course, in the UN vision, where they want to see peace and stability in South Sudan. So these are all the visions that are trying to shape South Sudan. But in our discussion today, we are going to focus on the vision of decentralized system of governments, where the government shall be controlled in the center, with some powers being given to the regions or the states. And also, in addition to that, there is the vision of a tribal dominance. Those are the visions that are now being promoted in South Sudan. And because of this, other people feel like they are marginalized, and that is why some people are actually waging war against the system in the South Sudan. So, so this is briefly about the vision. So something that is started as an independent country now is actually fighting within itself about like what vision should govern South Sudan, what system of governance, and should South Sudan be an ethnic country or a democratic federal country. So this is what is happening now, and because of lack of agreement among the different diverse groups of people in South Sudan, that's why we see this continuous struggle. We see these human rights abuses, and we see this lack of reconciliation, unity, and peace in South Sudan. So now it is incumbent upon the people of South Sudan really to look at the issues critically, sit down and find a way about how to move forward. And unless the people of South Sudan do that, the country will continue to have a lot of internal conflicts, internal wars, and in the end of the day, the innocent people, especially the women and children, are the ones who will actually suffer the most. So let's move to the peace agreements in South Sudan. During the history of South Sudan, during the history of struggle in South Sudan, between the South Sudanese people and the successive governments in Northern Sudan, a lot of people had died. Many people become displaced within the country, outside the country, and some of them actually went to the diaspora. But during all this time, let's say from 1955 till now, there are 3 peace agreements that were signed. In other words, we just want to emphasize that there are several peace agreements that were signed, but we're going to focus on those 3. The first peace agreement was signed between the South Sudan Liberation Movement, also locally known as Anyanya 1, and the government of the Sudan at that time. The government of Sudan, which was led by the former dictator Jafar Mohammed Nimeri. So after more than 17 years of fighting between the South and the North, the people in the region, the countries in the region, decided to pressure the rebels in the South and the government in the Northern Sudan to reach a peaceful agreement so that the people can live in peace. Therefore, in 1972, under the guidance of the then Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie, he was able to bring the 2 warring parties to the negotiating table, and a peace agreement was signed in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa, an agreement that was termed as Addis Ababa Agreement Number 1. And in that agreement, the South Sudanese people were granted a local regional autonomy, where they were supposed to govern themselves for 5 years, and after those 5 years, a referendum was supposed to be carried out, in which the people of South Sudan were to choose between secession or unity within the United Sudan. But during that time, of course, due to those underlying issues that we mentioned, a conflict, an internal conflict between the different ethnic groups in South Sudan emerged. To be exact, there were two groups. The first group was led by the people in the Equatorial region, the people in the southern part of the South Sudan, and they were calling, it was actually championed by the leader of the Anyanya One, the leader of the South Sudan Liberation Movement, General Joseph Lago, who was now calling for a decentralized system of governance in South Sudan. I don't want to talk more about that peace agreement, but in this paper here, which was published by Africa, and there is a magazine called Africa, in other words, Africa, in Egypt in 1996. It actually talked about these differences in South Sudan, and those are like ideological differences or differences in the systems of governance in South Sudan. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. So the first group, as I had mentioned, was promoted by General Joseph Lago, and he was calling for a decentralized system of governance in South Sudan, because the people, some people in the other regions of South Sudan felt like they are marginalized after the signing of the peace agreement. They did not share in the power, they did not share in the resources, and they did not share in the administration of South Sudan. And as a result of this, they wanted a decentralized system of the government where some powers can be given to the leadership in the central government, and then there will be a devaluation of powers to the other regions of South Sudan. As a result, they called for the division of South Sudan into three regions: the Upper Nile in the north, the Upper Nile in the north, and then the Bahar al-Ghazal in the west, and then the Equatorial region in the south. And then the other vision was actually led by a group of the Dinka ethnic group in the Sudanese National Parliament, and this group was championed by a South Sudanese politician called Bana Malwal, and his group and his colleagues in the National Parliament in Khartoum, and they were calling for the unity of South Sudan. Now, due to lack of agreement between the two different groups and the two versions of system of governance, so the then president Nimeri, who signed the Addis Ababa Agreement, plus his allies in the north, took the opportunity to divide the South Sudan into three regions. And as a result, a war broke out again in South Sudan in 1983 under the leadership of Dr. John Garang, and he now formed a movement called the Sudan's People Liberation Movement. Now, this movement, instead of calling for an independent South Sudan, is actually calling for a united Sudan, which is based on democracy, secularism, equal development, and a voluntary unity. So the war continued from 1983 to 2005, where another peace agreement was signed, the Comprehensive Peace Agreement in South Sudan. In that peace agreement, the unity of South Sudan was given another chance for 6 years, and after those 6 years, the people of South Sudan were granted the right for self-determination. If this attractive unity between the North and South Sudan failed to exist, then the people of South Sudan had the opportunity now to vote for self-determination. And in 2011, the people of South Sudan voted overwhelmingly, about 99.8% in favor of an independent South Sudan. So that is another important peace agreement that actually granted the people of South Sudan the right of self-determination, a self-determination that actually led to an independent South Sudan in July 2011. Now let's see what happened after the independence of South Sudan. Those underlying issues that we talk about now resurfaced. You know, the issues of decentralization and tribal hegemony resurface. You know, the things that were not, the problems that were not solved during the first Addis Ababa agreement now resurface. And those problems now included other problems such as power, such as control of resources, such as foreign interventions, and so on. And again, due to lack of agreement, now a new fighting actually emerged in South Sudan. So in 2013, you know, the SPLM that secured the independence of South Sudan now began to fight within itself. You know, the leadership of the movement now started to fight for power and tribal control of the country. And as a result, a war actually emerged. And that war actually continued from 2011 till now, a war in which like thousands of people had been killed, several others, if not millions others, actually became refugees in the neighboring countries, and some became displaced within the country. And in the war also there were a lot of gross human rights abuses, and the people who suffered the most are the children, the women, and the elderly. And as a result, there was no peace in South Sudan. In any case, in 2018, another peace agreement was signed in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa. The same thing, you know, after the neighboring people, neighboring countries and the regional organizations and the international community saw the suffering of the people of South Sudan, they now pressured the leadership of the different warring factions in South Sudan to sign the peace agreement in Addis Ababa on September 18, 2018. And the purpose of that agreement is just to stop the war and then give peace a chance, another chance in South Sudan. And as most of you are aware now, like, there are different other groups that did not sign the agreement due to the same factors that we mentioned: system of governance, sharing of resources, like how can the power be shared in South Sudan. And again, we continue to see the different divisions. So our take here is that unless all of these groups can come together, you know, to talk over the issues, and unless a genuine discussion is conducted on the issues of disagreement, such as the system of governance, the sharing of power, the sharing of resources, issues of development, issues of unity, issues of freedom, the things that the people of South Sudan fought for in the first place, then South Sudan will continue to fight within itself or with itself, and the people will continue to suffer. And of course, in addition to that, there is foreign meddling in the affairs of South Sudan. You know, those visions that we had actually mentioned earlier, you know, every group or every country or every organization is trying to promote its interests in South Sudan. And as a result, the leadership of South Sudan also need to come into terms with the fact that, you know, they are not there like just to be in power, but they're there to actually promote the visions and the objectives in which South Sudan become an independent country. And that is those are the areas of contention there, ladies and gentlemen. Usually in the African cultures or in the South Sudanese cultures, if there is a problem, people usually stop and think, and people come and sit down and find out exactly what is the problem. And after they have found the problem, then they can now talk about it, talk about solutions, and then see the way forward. But as you can see over the years, what has happened in South Sudan is that people tend to ignore the problems, and people tend to impose their will, hoping that through this, peace can be achieved. But if the history of South Sudan had taught us anything, it has actually taught us the contrary. And that is that unless the people sit down to talk about those issues and to forge a new and united direction for South Sudan where there is peace, stability, respect of the dignity of the people, respect of the hard-earned independence and freedom of the people, then there will be no peace and stability in South Sudan. And the people of South Sudan and the leadership also need to come to terms that, there should be an independent country. All of this struggle over the years is for an independent country called South Sudan. And because of this, they need to also, tell the neighboring countries or the countries that they are doing business with that, we are an independent country and we need to continue as such. We don't need to be pressured to follow somebody or need to be directed to follow a certain entity. So that is it. So in order now for South Sudan to forge a bright future in the light of all these difficulties, then we are recommending that the people of South Sudan or the leaders should stop the conflicts by any means. All the warring parties in South Sudan should stop the conflict by all means. And then number two, they need to give the people of South Sudan their hard-earned freedom, hard-earned land. They need to give them peace and justice. Also, the leadership has to introduce good governance, respect, and encourage the people to love one another, to respect one another, and to stop the misappropriation of funds. We mentioned that South Sudan is a very rich country, and if these resources are used wisely, then all the people will actually benefit from the dividends of their freedom. And then in conclusion, the people of South Sudan and the leadership in South Sudan needs to adopt the values that all the people of South Sudan share. Values of peace and reconciliation, the values of good governance, the values of rule of the law, the value of equality, the value of national reconciliation, development, and prosperity. So we just hope that despite the current situation that the South Sudanese people are undergoing, we just hope and believe that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, a light that will actually usher South Sudan into a new dawn of freedom, peace, development, and unity. So ladies and gentlemen, we just want to thank you for your time. And until we meet again, we just want to say, have a nice day. Bye for now.